it really speaks to the culture. It speaks to the impact we have in the world. It speaks to how we're addressing climate change. It shows the actions that we're working on and the trajectory that we have that isn't just dollars and cents. My dad raised me to be very independent, very science-focused, and he told me once at a very young age, he says, if you want to be my boss one day, you better go be a chemist or an engineer, and you can work in the chemical industry. And here I am.
All signs pointed to you working in the chemical industry from an early age. I love it.
I really like gardening. I told my husband, I said, will you cook dinner? Because I'm going to go rip out some plants. And the whole process of just ripping out plants.
Therapeutic?
There's therapeutic.
Welcome to the LyondellBasell podcast series. We're discussing the 2023 Sustainability Report titled Everyday Sustainability. Our first guest is LYB Executive Vice President Tracey Campbell. She's EVP of Sustainability and Corporate Affairs, and she's here to discuss plastic waste. But to give a little bit of background on Tracey before we start, she began her career at LYB back in April of 1998 as Manager of Supply Chain and Logistics, and over the course of the past 26 years, she's held various roles at LYB, including most recently VP of Global Public Affairs and Director of Polyolefins Asia Pacific, based out of Hong Kong. Tracey, I couldn't go through your entire bio because it was too many roles, but we're going to cover a variety of topics from the Sustainability Report, ending plastic waste, to the Plastics Treaty, to women in STEM and all that. But I wanted to get to know you a little bit better, first of all, because I think a lot of both our LYB employees and people external to the company may not know about your background. And I find it very fascinating. You grew up on a farm in Canada. So first of all, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, thanks, Deepi. You know, growing up on a farm was incredible, right? I had this amazing learning with respect to taking care of animals and responsibility. And I had two younger sisters, and I just loved it. But I think one thing that people don't know is I also grew up on a farm that was next to what was really considered one of the first oil discoveries in North America, in a town called Petrolia. I even went to Petrolia High School, right next to the town of Oil Springs. So the oil and gas and then eventually petrochemical industry was right in my backyard. My father worked for ExxonMobil. So I had this amazing opportunity to live a very rural life, but also see the benefits and not be afraid of the oil and gas and petrochemical industry. So that's really how I kind of came to be in this space, because I viewed the people had great jobs, they had great careers. My dad raised me to be very independent, very science-focused, and he told me once at a very young age, he says, if you want to be my boss one day, you better go be a chemist or an engineer, and you can work in the chemical industry. And here I am.
All signs pointed to you working in the chemical industry from an early age. I love it. So you went from the business side to your current role. I discussed some of the roles that you held. What do you think has been the biggest difference between running a business and now positioning a business in your current role?
There's really not a lot of difference. When you think about what's so important, whether you're running a business, whether you're running a facility, or whether you're trying to position the company with a brand new strategy, it's all about strategic thinking, being able to simplify the messages and influence the peers, influence the public with respect to what we're trying to do. And I think now that we've embraced sustainability in our strategy, and we've figured out a new brand story and a new tagline, it's much easier to have those dinner table conversations or conversations with governments about what is it about our industry that benefits society, what are we doing to benefit society, and how can we work on that together. So I think it's sort of putting it all together. It's really an exciting time for our industry.
Yeah, and LYB just recently released its sustainability report, and you talk about putting it all together. One of the key challenges of the report is ending plastic waste. So what is the role of our company when it comes to ending plastic waste, and what are some of the major goals and achievements in this area?
If you think about our sustainability report and even our focus on sustainability, you know, the three pillars are ending plastic waste, addressing climate change, and supporting a thriving society. So I'll focus a little bit on plastic waste. But if you think about our goal to produce, you know, at least 2 million metric tons annually of either recycled or renewable polymers by the end of this decade and create value by doing that, that is one leading opportunity that we have to offer society at large to increase recycling And every drop of material that we can get back from recycling is a drop less of fossil fuels that we need in the future for our growth in our companies. So it's really demonstrating that leadership, having that vision, and really investing and mobilizing the team like Yvonne is doing to build that business to produce circular and low carbon. It's really exciting for us. And I think as an industry, we're committed, but as a company, we're taking a leading position there. And we've got lots of examples in the report to take a look at some of our specific actions that we're addressing year over year.
When you first started with the company, there was no sustainability report. It's something that's come out just in the last so many years.
Right, I think since 2017.
2017 and 2018 came out the first report. So what are your thoughts on just releasing a sustainability report and how transparent companies like LYB are being in that area now?
Yeah, if you think about the sustainability report, and we talked about this morning in one of our culture ambassador meetings, the annual report is about the dollars and the cents and a little bit about, the money we make globally. The sustainability report, which many companies now call Global Impact Report, it really speaks to the culture. It speaks to the impact we have in the world. It speaks to how we embrace social issues like DEI, pay equity, gender parity. It speaks to how we're addressing climate change. It shows the actions that we're working on and the trajectory that we have. And then, of course, ending plastic waste. It talks about all the things we're doing to really mobilize this activity. So I think those reports are increasingly, you see them come together, and reading one with the other kind of tells you what that company is like. It informs you about the culture of the company. And it's a great way to attract talent and retain talent and tell our company story that isn't just dollars and cents.
You've been telling our company story at a lot of different events in the industry, and you've represented LYB at some pretty big global events, including Inc. and for the Plastic Treaty talks. So tell us a little bit of why the Plastics Treaty is important to circularity and what the future of plastics looks like under a treaty like that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I just got back from Inc. yesterday.
Fresh on your mind.
So Inc. or INC4, think of it as it's a United Nations process to basically negotiate these treaties, very similar to what we know as the Paris Accord for climate. We're in the process, and we're near the end of the process to negotiate something for plastics pollution. Basically, it's how do we have a global treaty to end plastics pollution? And my role on behalf of the industry and on behalf of our company is really to basically go out there and influence government officials, influence countries, more than 170 countries around the world gather to talk about what can we collectively do to reduce plastic pollution. So when I'm speaking, I'm really speaking on behalf of all of the industry, and I'm there with industry peers as well. But we're talking about how we design our applications to be increasingly recycled. We're talking about how we design for reuse. We spend a lot of time talking about recycled content mandates, because if the world were to embrace recycled content mandates in certain applications, that would drive innovation and demand for recycled materials. And we believe that that's going to happen. Most countries are embracing that. So we can see an uptick in recycling. We can see the value being generated by our circular and low carbons business. So it's just really, I really enjoy what I'm doing because I have so much plastics experience and I believe in our company's strategy. So it's really exciting to be there I've spent time with the governments of Indonesia and Japan and certain Middle Eastern countries, South American countries, and we're all talking about what is it we can do to address plastic pollution beyond just simple waste management. So it's really an honor to be able to have those conversations with elected officials from around the world.
Recently, we also had Earth Day, and you wrote a piece for LYB.com. You discussed how plastics and the planet can coexist.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write this piece, and what do you hope the audience took away from it?
Yeah, and I do believe it's plastic and planet as opposed to plastic versus planet, because if you think about where the world is today, and you think about the growth in population and the rise of middle class around the world, so much of that has been enabled by petrochemicals and specifically plastic. So the benefits of plastic outnumber the issues that we have with pollution. And I think the challenge that we all have to do, and what I wanted to convey in that podcast or that article, was, let's think about the benefits of plastics and make sure that we don't take those away as we also solve this pollution problem. So that's where I think plastics are here to stay. There are tremendous value from plastics in promoting, the world as it's going forward, whether it's food preservation, whether it's building and construction, healthcare. We don't want to lose that. But how do we continue to grow in that space, but address the pollution issues? So I do think it's an and, not an or.
Well, you mentioned all your experience in plastics. I think just for a woman in STEM and a woman in engineering, a lot of people look up to you, and you were doing it at a time when there weren't a lot of women in STEM and in engineering. So can you share with us how much the industry and that landscape has changed since you began your career to now? And what stands out the most to you about women in these sort of careers?
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the only women for a very long time early in my career. But I will tell you, at the same time, I didn't necessarily feel that I had a barrier to advancement. I mean, I always felt welcome for the most part. The vast majority of men that I worked with around the world were very welcoming. But I think as I was advancing in my career and sort of pushing and speaking up, I think one thing I always tell women is you need to be brave. I mean, part of it is being brave, speaking up, getting your facts, learning, and then articulating it in a way that you can show people that you belong here, you have a right to be here, you've done your homework, and you're willing to put yourself into those positions to demonstrate that. So I do tell people that, it's important for women to raise their hand for different assignments. It's important for women to try things outside of their comfort zone. And I think just having the courage and putting yourself out there is very important. So I think the processes that we have now in society and even in our company make it a bit easier for maybe women that aren't as forward as saying, hey, I've got something to say. So I think that's helping. But again, it also, I tell people, a lot of it's up to you too. You've got to be brave and bold.
That was actually my next question what was some of the advice that you want to give young women? But it sounds like just to speak your mind and not to be shy about what your opinion is.
Right.
That's really a big piece of it for women in STEM.
And get your homework done first too. I mean, I can remember one really great mentor that I had. I remember it was also a woman because, I looked up to her and she said, okay, Tracey, that was a great speech, but you don't have your homework, you don't have your facts right? So you have to do your work, check the facts, get all your data before you have that informed decision to say, hey, this is what I believe in. I think this is the right way to go. So I had a great mentor years ago, and that's what I tell people now is just, be bold, be brave. There was another person that said to me once, and it was, when people aren't selected for a position, this particular individual says you can't get hit by the luck wagon unless you put yourself in the middle of the street. And I know that sounds a little long, but it's not about being lucky. It's about put yourself out there, and maybe you're going to get told no a time or two, but eventually they're going to be like, hey, we notice you, we hear you. So
all about being right place, right time, sometimes putting yourself
and putting yourself out there to be seen and to be heard and to be noticed. Yeah.
Well, that is great, Tracey. But before I let you go, I have a couple of fun questions I want to ask you because I think I want to get to know you a little bit better. You've lived all over the world, so I have to ask you, what's your favorite city to visit and your favorite city to live in?
Visit Kathmandu in Nepal. And you might be thinking, why did she pick that? When we lived in Asia, we had an opportunity, my husband and I and our son, we visited Kathmandu, and there's the allure of Mount Everest right there. There's the trekking, but it's just this culturally rich city. It's an underdeveloped city. They had major earthquakes, in the last 10 years. So there's still a lot of rubble and temples, and there's monkeys, and there's dirt roads and cattle and no waste management. And it's just this amazing culturally, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just a vision of history and culture and politics and challenges of the developing world that I just absolutely adored. I was terrified to cross the street because it's just, there's no traffic signals. Yeah, it was crazy, but I loved it. We like adventures in our family.
Okay.
We don't, go lay on the beach.
It's not easy to get to either.
Yeah,
so.
it's not easy to get to. But when you live in Hong Kong, it's a little easier.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Well, what about to live in?
Oh,
live?
I really enjoyed, and I was just with the Plastics Treaty. It was actually up in Canada. I mean, Canada is a wonderful place to live. I will,
You're a little
it's my
biased.
homeland. I'm
It's
a little
fair, yeah.
biased. But Houston's a wonderful place to live. I think the beauty of Houston, there's so many people from all over the world. It is a very culturally rich, diverse city. We have so much to offer in terms of our theater and NASA and this industry. So honestly, I really enjoy living in the Houston area. I wish it had a bit more geography and a little less humidity, but, it is what it is. And honestly, Hong Kong was incredible. Just an experience like no other. I can only recommend anybody to visit Hong Kong or live in Hong Kong. It's just a little expensive.
Yeah. Definitely on the bucket list. All right, what about hobbies in your free time? What do you like to do for fun?
I really like gardening.
Oh, okay.
Many people don't know, and I think that's my way of relaxing. In fact, when I just got home from the Plastics Waste Treaty, I was a little bit tired and stressed out. I told my husband, I said, will you cook dinner? Because I'm going to go rip out some plants. And the whole process of just ripping out plants.
Therapeutic.
There's therapeutic. So I really enjoy, and my grandmother was a British gardener who was even, she was in horticultural magazines, and I always picked up, I think, my green thumb or my gardening thumb from her. But it's my mindfulness.
Very green. I like it. Is it flowers or vegetables?
Well, down here it's not a lot because it's so hot.
Yeah.
It tends to be flowers. But when I lived in Canada, it was vegetables, crops, everything. So I kind of grew up with that. It's the farming in me. I can't go with the farming. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to end, right where we began with farming and growing up in Canada. Tracey, it's been such a pleasure. That's going to do it for you're our first guest on this series of the Sustainability Report podcast from LyondellBasell. And you can read the full LYB Sustainability Report on lyb.com. You can also download the full report and check out Tracey's thought leadership piece from Earth Day. That's also up there as well. But stay tuned for more episodes in our podcast series. Thank you so much for listening.